both of our interpretations can stand together without being contradictions.
So the issue with his remarks, I'm just trying to find where the daylight is here. Is it just on the traitor comment? Like, what are your specific differences between that?
What you just read as an interpretation is not something with which I would disagree, as long as we're not solely focused on current MPs.
Go ahead, please.
And the other part of it is, as I said in my first statement on this matter, and just to go back to my exact words, there's no question that beyond the question of proactive outreach to a foreign government, certain, and I described it initially as fewer than a handful of current members of Parliament, have allowed themselves, and again, going back to the original comments from CSIS, semi-wittingly, or wittingly, allowed themselves to become compromised. I said at the time, they have been beneficiaries of foreign governments interfering in nomination contests. I stand by that, and Mr. Singh, I think, is not saying something entirely contradictory, although he's more willing to use words about unethical or potentially criminal. I don't think those words apply. But again, differences between our views of how we react, how we interpret, and what is in the unredacted full report are really very, very small indeed.
On that point, so go ahead.
Okay. Madame, mais justement, sur le même sujet, Monsieur Singh,
subject, Mr. Singh said, I am not relieved or I am not reassured. You said, I am relieved, I am reassured. And he said the exact opposite in English and in French. So the feeling or the impression with which she leaves, is that a contradiction to your eyes? And how do you explain? Have you spoken to Mr. Singh? No, and thank you for the question. I will not have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Singh. I'm looking forward to having a conversation, but it's a question that is completely subjective. I myself, and I have a lot of concern from the moment I read the report. I have no idea the feelings of Mr. Singh the moment he read it. It's
I was, as I've described it, I think I used the word plenty freaked out. That at the idea that I could be serving in a chamber with people I know across party lines, that any one of them would be prepared to sell out their country to a foreign government. So that's where I was. I was up here. And I read the report, I was really relieved. I don't know if Mr. Singh was really alarmed or became more alarmed. I'm not going to say for one moment, I'm not going to contradict his emotions. How could I? He experienced what he experienced. I experienced what I experienced. The key question is, on reading the report, did we see different things? I don't think so, not from what he said publicly. I'd love the opportunity in a secure location to discuss with him in private. We can't even have our staffs in the room based on the restrictions around top secret security clearance to discuss what we really read and saw. I went through the report carefully. As I said, I read it. It took me 3.5 hours. C'est une expérience.
This is a very rare experience to be alone in a room with a report without access to take notes or to make a copy because it's impossible. But always I took the public report and I did a comparison between the secret report and the public report to better remember the differences between the two.
I've done this before. Once I had the top secret security clearance that I got last summer, my first experience of going into a secure location organized by Privy Council Office security analysts is an unusual one, and you can only read and you can't take notes, and I knew to take my time and go slowly. So that's all I can say is I'm confident with what I read. On the other hand, I don't have notes, neither does Mr. Singh. it's an interesting experience and rigorous mentally to do that. And I don't want to, for any reason at all, create impressions for Canadians that Mr. Singh and I disagree on the contents. And I also want to confirm again the hard work of the individual parliamentarians to go through 33,000 pages of the same kind of effort that I went through to read one report.
There is no doubt that this report has undermined confidence in Parliament, in MPs. How does Canada and how do Canadians move forward if they're never going to find out exactly what we're talking about here?
They can't, look, if this is one important point, and thank you for raising it. I've seen in the media some people saying, well, publish the whole report. Let me be very clear, that can't be done without jeopardizing intelligence assets. In other words, there's sources of information that and there's more than one entity looking at security and intelligence information. There's CSE, there's CSIS, there's RCMP, and then, of course, we're also looking at the role of Global Affairs Canada and being concerned about what our operations are overseas. The work of diplomats involves, in every country, Canada's diplomats work to build relationships. They talk to congressmen and they talk to members of parliament in other countries. We don't want to create such a chill around normal diplomacy that isn't interference, that we compromise the diplomatic muscle of Canada. There's a lot of different elements to this in terms of the bigger context. But again, the whole report can't be made public without endangering even people's lives. So that's number one. I think we'll make progress when, as David McGuinty has said, we have that adult conversation. Every party leader, get your top secret security clearance. It's now been made available to us. And by the way, this is the first time in Canadian history, of which I'm aware, when every political party leader in the House, every opposition party leader has been offered the opportunity to seek top secret security clearance. There's no guarantee you'll get it when you seek it. You put through quite a lot of rigorous questioning about your loyalty to Canada and your history, et cetera. But let's assume that what I'm seeking and what David McGuinty has suggested would be helpful, where all of us as federal party leaders have our top secret security clearance. We've all read the report under the conditions of rigor that are required, and then privately have a conversation with each other and with our colleagues who are on the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and actually discuss what we know, what we don't know, what we can share with Canadians, with the overarching goal of sharing as much as possible to repair damage to the reputation of Parliament so that Canadians can have confidence that their elected members of Parliament are loyal to Canada first and foremost. And again, we have to take other steps as parliamentarians, and this will be more difficult because there's federal jurisdiction, and then there's what do we do about foreign interference in other orders of government, municipally, provincially, and so on, which are also have been referenced publicly and in the public version of the report. We need to do a lot more to take, and so again, when I say I'm reassured, and I saw my friend Terry Glavin, who's a friend from Vancouver Island, he said, well, I'd said there's nothing to worry about. Let me be really clear, there's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to take seriously. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that the Green Party doesn't take foreign interference seriously. We take it very seriously indeed. But there's no reason to create an atmosphere of McCarthyism, sort of a witch hunt feeling of which MP can be trusted. I trust my colleagues in Parliament, some of whom should have shown more sense than to accept, but did they know in advance? We don't know. We're still in the semi-wittingly, unwittingly. What did they know when they started seeing busloads of people show up at a nomination meeting? That's a separate question. Did they deliver a quid pro quo to a foreign government to get those busloads of people? Not from anything I've had access to reading.
Madam Mayor, can I just ask you? Okay.
Just briefly to add, and maybe to give Elizabeth a moment to take a drink of water. I just want to respond. Your question about, well, why not just publish the full unread?
Report.
Sorry,
That's not what I
names.
asked. I just said, how do we move forward if Canadians don't have confidence and we don't know exactly what we're talking about here?
Right. So I think part of the answer to this question is about this is why we elect people in this country, is that we trust folks as elected leaders in this country to take on this important work. And
Some of those MPs right now potentially stand accused of what some have called treason. So
Let me get back to this. This is why I will be firmly clear again in saying that I read the full unredacted report. The word treason does not apply to any current sitting MP, at least in the unredacted report of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. And they went through 33,000 pages of intelligence information to come to that conclusion. Canadians can have confidence, as I said, at most, a few of our colleagues currently serving are potentially compromised by foreign interference. But there's no information of which I'm aware that suggests what occurred in the one instance, which I still think should be investigated, and that name should be known, and there might be, unless that intelligence information was false, and we always work in our system of justice, it's very important to maintain the presumption of innocence. Anyone accused of a crime must have the opportunity to defend themselves, have due process, et cetera, et cetera. But if, so there's an underscoring the if, what the intelligence information about the former MP described publicly here at, just to make sure I stick to the language used, that a former MP, a particularly concerning case of a then member of Parliament maintaining a relationship with a foreign intelligence officer, and again, the source is, according to CSIS, the member of Parliament sought to arrange a meeting in a foreign state with a senior intelligence official and also proactively provided the intelligence officer with information provided in confidence. I will say again, clearly, having read the full unredacted version of the committee's work, this is a unique example. This is not a general broad brush across anybody but this one individual in terms of that kind of description, of that kind of not just coziness with a foreign government, but willing to sell out Canada and provide information that they had received in confidence, and as a sitting MP at that time, hand it proactively to a foreign intelligence officer. Again, that is not, there's case studies in here, and there are some examples where you say, well, as a group, and this isn't a criticism of any MP, and sometimes when you read a lot suddenly or too quickly, they could conflate. Every single party, numerous MPs have been targets of foreign interference. That doesn't mean they're participating. It means, like Michael Chong, target of a foreign government trying to intimidate them or their family, targets. So again, there's no other example that's even close to the fact set that is provided on page 26 of the report about a former member of Parliament, not even close to attaching itself to any current sitting members of Parliament.
You're saying, Ms. May, that there are potentially colleagues who are serving with you that are potentially compromised. Do you view, based on the unredacted report, that their behavior is unethical? I know you don't want to say criminal, but unethical.
And this is, again, a matter of interpretation and judgment, not disagreeing on the facts as they exist, because I think they're pretty well understood. And certainly the one example that's very public is the case of Han Dong and that his nomination efforts were, according to the public version of this report, that he received significant assistance from the People's Republic of China and their United Front Work Department and so on. It's not at all clear from the public report that he was aware in advance. So you can ask yourself, should someone have known? Then the question of ethics is, I would say, murkier than to make a strong statement of behavior was unethical. Again, potentially compromised? Yes. Was it unethical in terms of, was it knowing? Was it unwitting? Was it semi-witting? I'm sorry I'm not trying to obfuscate, but I'm being... This semi-witting or witting language is not particularly helpful, but that's what we have from the intelligence information that was obtained through the work of our government in the sphere of basically spy versus spy. It's not the world I'm used to, but things that my concern about ethics is that our commissioner for ethics, the code of ethics and the ethical transgressions of an MP, do not codify working with a foreign government or testifying against your own government in a secret tribunal. It's not considered unethical. So I think our ethics code, and the committee's pointed to the same thing, the ethics code needs to take into account foreign interference. And in that sense, it's really impossible to comment on, well, there's two uses of the word unethical. One is codified and one is common sense. But if you
common sense, though, Ms. May, like common sense wise, would you, if you did these things, and of course I'm not saying that you would have, but would you think that that is unethical from Elizabeth May's perspective, not from the commissioner?
since I'd never do them, I don't know if it's just not being stupid or not being unethical or just, I don't know. I'm a straight up kind of person, and I've always, I wasn't in this room, but I was in a previously named Charles Lynch Press Theatre when in May 2006 I announced I was going to seek leadership of the Green Party of Canada. And I remember saying to the journalists there that my goal was to tell the truth all the time. I hope I've stuck to that, which means that what I think doesn't really matter about that current fact set. I think they're potentially compromised. I think one of the things that comes out of these reports is in terms of what CSIS and other intelligence officers do in terms of risk minimization. One of the things to minimize the threat and risk minimization includes such things as briefing the individual involved. I think if a CSIS agent comes to chat with you and says, do you realize you've been too cozy? That's one thing. But if it was the ethics commissioner that already has the right to haul any MP into the ethics commissioner's office and say, you filled out your financial thing here and you say you don't have any conflicts of interest, but we've figured out that your spouse has shareholdings in the company where you made a decision. There's an ethics code that makes it very clear when you're going to find an ethics violation. And at the moment, that ethics code is silent as to foreign interference, and I think that needs to be fixed.
Okay, we are listening to Elizabeth May address reporters on why her interpretation of a security report about foreign interference and MPs being involved differs from that of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. May said after reading the report she was relieved. Jagmeet Singh said the opposite. May saying this morning that both interpretations can stand and that she would like to meet with Jagmeet Singh privately to discuss what they read because they can't take any notes while reading that briefing, that unredacted report. She is also encouraging every party leader to seek the security clearance to try to access that report. She said that treason does not apply to any current sitting member of Parliament.